In this video, we're going to look at how to schedule tasks in Python using the schedule package. And we're going to create a script that will get the top articles from HackerNews. And we're going to schedule that script to run periodically so we can get regular updates from the website. And this can be useful as, for example, a daily process where you might want to fetch the top 10 articles from HackerNews and then save them to a database or your local file system. We're going to see how to schedule these kind of jobs using Python and also how you can monitor these jobs using BetterStack. So let's get started. So let's start with a look at the schedule documentation. As we can see, this is a Python job scheduling module, and it allows you to run Python functions or any other callable object periodically, and it uses this very friendly English-like syntax, and that's one of the key plus points of the schedule module. If we go down to the code example, you can see that we import schedule, and this is the syntax here. We have a very intuitive syntax. For example, if we want to run this function here called job every 10 minutes, we can call the .every function, pass the number 10 into that, and then we can refer to a time frame here such as minutes, hours, or days, for example, and also we can refer to days of the week. And then after the time frame, we can call .do and pass the function we want to schedule into that particular function. Now, because this is scheduled and we don't have any kind of process manager behind the scenes, what we do at the bottom here is we create an infinite while loop. And then we call the schedule.runPending method, and we can sleep for any period of time in between calling that. And any scheduled jobs that are due to run when we run this function here are going to be executed when this line of code is seen. So we're going to see an example of that in this video. And what we're going to do in this video is we're going to scrape some data from HackerNews. So for example, here's the front page of HackerNews. It has a list of articles and links. And each of these, as you can see here, have a score. And this refers to the number of upvotes for that particular article. What we're going to do is scrape that data using Python. So let's open up VS Code. And I have a directory open that contains an empty Python file and also the command line where we have a Python virtual environment activated. Let's run the pip install command. We're going to install the requests module in order to send HTTP requests to HackerNews. And we're also going to install the beautifulsoup 4 package. And this package will allow you to extract data from HTML content. We're going to use that later in the video to get the data from HackerNews. And finally, we also need the schedule package in order to schedule these tasks. So let's run the pip install command. And once that's finished, what we can do is clear the terminal, and I'm going to minimize that a little bit. And let's bring a few imports in at the top. We're going to import requests, and we're going to import the beautifulsoup object. Now we need to set up a URL to the HackerNews website, which is this one here. So I'm going to copy this URL, and we're going to set up a variable in the Python script here called URL and set it equal to that. Now once we've done that, we can use the requests module here. I'm going to copy that, and we're going to get a response when we call requests.get. And we're going to pass the URL into that, and that's going to give us back a response. We can print that to the terminal, and we're going to see that we get back a response here. So let's execute this script with Python, and the name of the script that I have is scrape.py. So we're going to execute that, and we get back a response object, and that's coming from the requests module, and it has a status code of 200. So that's a response object. We can also look at the content of the response using the .content property. If we re-execute this again, we're going to see that we get back a lot of HTML content, and that's the content that represents this HackerNews page. We're now going to take that content and we're going to use beautifulsoup in order to process it and extract the data. So let's clear this print statement here, and we're going to pass the response content into that beautifulsoup object that we imported, and we're going to create a variable here called soup and store that in there. Now we need to pass a second argument to this to tell beautifulsoup what the content type that we're parsing is, and that's going to be HTML. So we can pass as a string html.parser into that object. Now if we print this soup here at the bottom, we're going to see that it's very similar to what we had before. We're just going to get back a bunch of HTML content. But the important thing is that once we have this in a beautifulsoup object, we can actually look through the DOM tree and we can extract pieces of data from that. So in order to demonstrate that, I'm going to go back to HackerNews. And what we want to get here is we want to get the title of the article, and we also want to get the link under the hood that's going to link to the external resource. And finally, we want to get back the number of points so that we can then sort that later in the video. So we need to extract 3 pieces of information here. I'm going to look at the DOM tree here by going to inspect on the browser, And you can see that the title of the article is represented by this class called title line, and it's the anchor tag underneath that. So the anchor tag is the child of that title line. So that's what we need to target in order to get back the title. And once we get the anchor tag, we can then extract the URL from the href attribute, as well as the actual name of the article from the text in that anchor tag. So let's start with that now. We need to get all spans that have a class of title line. So let's copy that class name and go back to VS Code. And once we have this beautiful soup object, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable here. And let's call this links, because we're going to get back the anchor tags here. And what we can use is a function in beautiful soup called select. So the select function, that allows you to pass in a CSS selector. And that's exactly what we need, because we have this class of title line. So we can use that syntax there with the dot at the front to get a class. This is going to find all spans with that class, and then we can get the direct child, the anchor tag, using that syntax there. So this is a selector expression, and it should return all of the links that we see on the page here. So let's print this out to the terminal, and actually I'm going to import from Python a function called pprint. So let's go to the top and import pprint, and we're going to print the first 3 links that we have here by using indexing like that. So let's clear the terminal, and we're going to execute python scrape.py, and you can see we get back at the bottom these links here in a list, and each one of them is an anchor tag. It has the href that we're going to extract, that's the link to the external article, and it also has the name of the article as well. Now the goal in this video is to take all of the articles that we see in this page, and we're going to order them by the one that has the most points at the top down to the one that has the least points. And we're going to create a scheduled task using the schedule module that's going to periodically go to this website and fetch these articles, sort them, and then eventually store the content in our local file system. So in order to sort the articles by the points, we need to actually fetch the points as well. So let's inspect the HTML for that, and you can see that the points are stored in a span with a class name of score. So let's copy that class and go back to VS Code. We're now going to fetch the scores, and again we're going to use that soup.select function. So .select, and we're going to pass the class name of score, and that's going to give us back all of the scores for each of the links that we found on the HackerNews website. Let's clear the pprint here, or rather let's change the links to the scores, and we're going to print the top 3 scores here, and you can see we get back the spans at the bottom with the number of points inside the text. Now what we want to produce in this video is a data structure, which is a Python dictionary that contains these details. So we want the name of the article, we want the URL for that particular article, and we also want the score. So we want one of those for each one of these links on the HackerNews website. So what we need to do when we get back this data here, the scores and the links, is we need to loop over that and create this dictionary for each one of those objects. Now let's clear out the pprint function here, and we need to loop over the links and the scores in unison, and we can do that with the zip function in Python. So let's see that now. We're going to take each link and each score, and that's going to come from calling the zip function and passing both of these lists into that function. Now for each one of these we need to create that dictionary structure that we see below. So let's start with the name of the article. We have the link that, as you can see at the bottom here, contains the name of the article in the text within that anchor tag. So let's create a variable called article name, and we're going to reference the link's text, and that link.text property will give us back the text within the anchor tag. And we're going to do something similar for the URL. We need to access the value of the href attribute. So let's create another variable called article URL, and that's going to be accessing the href for that link. So we can use the href.attributes dictionary and access the href key within that dictionary. So that's going to give us back the name and the URL. We also need the score, and we can get that directly from the score that we're iterating over. So let's create a variable called article score, and we're going to again reference the inner text within that span element, and that's going to give us back the text that you see here, for example 167 points. So what we can do once we have these 3 variables is we can actually create the dictionary here. Now before we do that, just above the for loop, I'm going to create a Python list called data, and we're going to append each dictionary for each iteration of this for loop to that data. So let's paste in this statement here, data.append, and then we create a dictionary here, and we are creating keys for the URL, the name and the score, and referencing the values that we had above. Now let's go down below here, and I'm going to remove this here, and we're going to use the pprint function again, and let's just print the final element of that data, and we can see what we get back at the bottom. When we run this, you can see we get back a dictionary containing the name of the article, and this is an article on temporal logic. and you can see the score is the same as the name, and that's because of a mistake that I've made. And the URL here, you can see we have that as well. Now the score should not be using the link, that should be using the score. So it's score.txt, and that will hopefully resolve that problem. If we run the script again, you can see this time the score is 13 points. Now what we need to do in order to order these by the score is we need to get rid of this text here. We want the value to be numerical. So what we're going to do here is we're going to split the score by the space, and we're going to only get back the first element, and that's going to split this 13 points as an example here, and it's going to return just the number 13. Once we have that, we can then convert that to an integer using Python's int function. Let's save that and run this again, and you can see now that we get back a numerical score of 13. And once we have the numerical score, we can then take this list of data and order the items by the score. So as an example, I'm going to create a variable here just below, and it's going to be called top 5, and we can use Python's sorted function and pass the data into that along with a lambda function that defines how the data is going to be sorted. So lambda x, for each item in the data, we want to use the value of the score in order to sort that, and that's going to give us back the scores from the smallest number to the largest. If we want the top 5, we need to reverse that, so we can pass reverse equals true into the sorted function, and to get the top 5 we can use indexing notation here, and we can slice the list that we get back and only get back the top 5. Now just below this statement, I'm going to print out the top 5 here, and let's expand the terminal, and we're going to see that we hopefully get back the top 5 articles. And we're getting an error that the sorted function expected 1 argument, but it got 2. And that's because we have this argument for the data, but we need to pass the lambda function using a keyword argument, and we're using key as the name of that and passing that lambda function. Let's try this again. Let's expand the terminal, and we're going to rerun this script and see what we get back. And you can see that the articles now that we're getting back have the highest score of 380, and we have 5 of these in the list, and this is the final one. It has a score of 235. So we've taken all of these articles, we've ordered them by the score, and we're showing the top 5 in this code. Now what we want to do is we want to actually schedule this using Python's schedule module. So the code that we see here that sends the request to HackerNews, and it gets back that content and extracts the data that we want. Let's say we wanted to execute that code periodically and get the top articles, and let's say save them to a database or the file system or somewhere else. You can do anything you want with the articles, but the point is sometimes you need to schedule these tasks. Let's now see how to do that with Python's schedule module. Now if we start by going back to the documentation, you can see that what happens with the schedule module is that you pass a function into this do function. So what we need to do is we need to define a Python function that represents the code we want to execute periodically. Let's go back to VS Code, and what we're going to do is create that function at the top here. So I'm going to create the function just at the top, and we're going to paste this in, and I'm going to tab some of this content over here. And once we've tabbed it all over, the final thing I want to do is actually return the top 5 articles. So we're sending the request in the function, we're performing this data processing, and then we want to actually return the top 5 articles. So the only change to the code here is that we've created this Python function called get top 5 HackerNews articles that returns a list of these dictionaries. All of the logic is exactly the same, and then finally we return the top 5. Now at the bottom, just below this function, we can call it and get back the top 5 articles, and if we expand the terminal and run this, we can make sure that this is still working and we still get back those results. So let's now utilize the schedule module, and we're going to call this function here on a particular schedule, and we're going to see how that works with this new module. So at the top, what I'm going to do is bring a couple of imports in. So we're going to import the schedule module and also the time module, and the time module is going to allow us to sleep, and that's within this while loop that calls the run pending function on the schedule module to check if anything needs to be run. So we're going to create that while loop, or rather copy it at the moment, and we're going to bring that down to the bottom of this page. And that's an infinite loop. It's going to run indefinitely, and between each iteration it's going to sleep for 1 second. And this is an important function here. This is going to check if there are any tasks scheduled to be run based on the schedules that we define, and we now need to define that schedule. So for example, if we wanted to run something every 10 minutes, that's the syntax for that. We call the every function, pass the number of minutes, and then we refer to the time period, and then call .do and pass in our scheduled function. What we're going to do now is we're going to run a task every 5 seconds. So let's now go back to VS Code and we're going to call this function get top 5 Hacker News articles every 5 seconds. So we can use the schedule module and we can call the every function. We pass the number 5 into that, and now we pass a time period, and it's going to be seconds. And what do we want to do every 5 seconds? Well, we just call .do and we can pass our function get top 5 Hacker News articles, and that's going to then schedule this to be run every 5 seconds, and then within the while loop we're going to sleep every second, but every 5 seconds this is going to pick up that this should be run, and it's going to schedule running that. So that is going to automate the process of running that function every 5 seconds. Now I'm going to comment this out, we don't need that anymore. And we're now going to run this, and we're going to see if we actually indeed run this function every 5 seconds. And we know that we are going to run it because we're going to print out the top 5 each time that it's run. So let's save the file, and we're going to clear the terminal, and we're going to rerun the script. It's now running, and it's going to wait, and the schedule module is going to schedule this task and run it after 5 seconds. And you can see now that we get back the results from Hacker News. And again, in another 5 seconds, it's going to schedule the task again, and it's going to fetch the data again. This is going to happen every 5 seconds because of the code that we've written. We've defined this schedule here, and we've scheduled our function to run every 5 seconds. Now, of course, we can use different time periods. We could put minutes in here, or hours, or even days. And you can get even more flexible with these time periods. I'm going to stop the script at the bottom. If we go back to the documentation, let's say you needed to run a task every Wednesday at a particular time, such as 1:15. That would be the syntax for that. And you can see below, if you needed to run a task every day at that particular time, but with this time zone as well, you can actually pass in the time zone too. So you can get very specific and granular with the time periods that the schedule module supports. I'm going to show one more demonstration of that now. If we go back to VS Code, let's say we wanted to run a task every day at 11:49, and I'm choosing that time very specifically because it's 1 minute from the current time that I'm actually recording this video. So let's remove the 5 from the every function, and what we're going to do here is we're going to schedule the task to run every day. But before we call .do, we can actually call another function called .at. So we want to run this function every day, but we want to do it at a particular time. And the time that I'm going to choose is 11:49, which is roughly 1 minute from now. So this time we're saying run this function here at 11:49 every single day of the week. Now what I'm going to do is expand the terminal again, and I'm going to run this function, and you can see that it's now waiting until that particular time in order to run. And as soon as it hits 11:49, which is roughly, well, right now, it's going to run the function and it's going to fetch the data from Hacker News. And this is very nice because it allows us to perform a task that can be done every single day, once a day, at a particular time that's going to not affect the business or not affect your operations in any way. And that might be something like a database backup that you need to do maybe once a day, and you might want to do that overnight, for example at 2 o'clock in the morning. You can schedule it to run at that time using this schedule module. Now there is a note on the documentation of when not to use schedule, and this is designed to be a simple solution for simple scheduling problems. But if you need things like job persistence, exact timing and concurrent execution, or any kind of localization, you might want to use a more robust solution. But it's a very nice package, and it has this very nice syntax here for scheduling tasks. And I want to show a few more things that the schedule module offers. For example, these functions that we have here that are scheduled, we can actually use a decorator in Python in order to schedule these. So if we scroll down a little bit on this page, I'm going to go to this section here on using a decorator to schedule a job. And I'm going to copy the import statement at the top into VS Code. So let's go back to VS Code, and I'm going to replace this import with the one that we've copied. And this time we need to call run pending directly. So I'm going to go down to the bottom here, and we can call run pending. And I'm going to remove this call to schedule.every because we're now going to schedule this function here using a decorator in Python. Now let's look at the decorator from the documentation. We have this decorator called repeat, and we can pass the schedule into that decorator. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this here, and we're going to change it up so that it works with our example. I'm going to paste this above the function, so we're decorating this function using this repeat decorator. And I'm going to remove this from the every call, and we're going to remove .minutes here. And I'm going to create another granular example here. And let's say we wanted to call this every 5 seconds as we did earlier on. we can pass that schedule into the repeat decorator. And I'm going to save this file now. We're going to go back to the terminal here and rerun 𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗽. And hopefully we're going to see that every 5 seconds this is going to run the function and it's going to bring back the results from HackerNews, and you can see that that is actually happening. So now we have changed the code a little bit here. Instead of using schedule.every, we are now using the repeat decorator in order to schedule this every 5 seconds. Now let's show one final example of how to pass arguments into these scheduled functions. So we have a decorator here and we have a function, but let's say we wanted to change this up. Instead of top 5, we wanted to get the top N HackerNews articles. So rather than hard coding the amount, we can pass a number in here, and that's going to be a parameter of type integer. So the parameter is called N, and what we need to do is change the body of the function, and we are returning the top 5 at the moment, so we're going to return the top N, and we can rename the variables as well. So I'm going to copy this variable name and replace these here. So now we're returning the top N, and N is passed as a parameter, but the question is, this is a scheduled function and we're scheduling it using this decorator here. How do we pass in the argument N? Let's return to the documentation again, and just below the decorator section we have this one here on how to pass arguments to a job, and this is very simple. We just pass keyword arguments to the do function, or if we're using a decorator we can just pass these in as additional arguments to the decorator. So let's go back to VS Code, and let's say we wanted to only fetch the top article. We can pass N equals 1 into the decorator, and then we can save that and clear the terminal, and we can then run 𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗽, and we get back only a single dictionary now representing the article with the top score. That's how we can pass arguments into our scheduled functions. And we're now going to move on and we're going to see how we can monitor this scheduled task using BetterStack. Now at the moment what this is doing is it's creating some data from the HackerNews articles. It's creating a dictionary for each one of those, and it's returning the top N articles to the caller. Now just before we move on, we could expand this example, and one way of doing that might be to take the top N articles and then send requests to get the HTML content for those and save them to the file system. That's maybe an example of a useful task that you want to automate. Get the top articles, save them to the file system where you can then view them offline later on, or even save them to a database. We might look at that a little bit later, but let's now add some monitoring to this. Now this is an important thing to note. When you have an automated task, monitoring is vital. It's really important to know if these tasks fail for any reason, and then you can take steps to fix any problems. Now the problem is, of course, these are automated and periodic tasks, and we don't always see the outcome of these tasks if we don't add proper monitoring, and that's where BetterStack comes in. We're going to go to the BetterStack platform now, and once we're on that page you can see the sidebar at the left hand side here, and what we're going to click here is the Heartbeats tab, and we can create what's called a heartbeat to monitor our cron jobs or our serverless workers, and then get alerts if these don't run correctly. So let's click the Create Heartbeat button, and we're asked what service this heartbeat will track. Let's give it a name of Periodic Web Scraping Job, and I'm going to keep the default settings here, but you can customize these. If you expect a heartbeat every X number of seconds, minutes, hours or days, you can specify that here. And the grace period, this refers to the time that the job needs to execute. And BetterStack recommend that you add a 20% reserve on top of the expected duration. And we're going to keep the defaults here for that. And one of the best things about this is that we can get on-call escalation. So you can set up rules for who's going to be notified and how whenever an incident occurs and the heartbeats are not being received on the platform. And some of the options are, you can get a call, you can get an SMS message, you can get an email or a push notification, and you can select multiple of these if you'd like to receive more than one of those. And again, if the on-call person doesn't acknowledge the incident, you can then take additional action, for example to alert all other team members within a time frame. Now I'm just going to keep the defaults here, and we're going to create the heartbeat, and what that's going to do is give us back this URL. We can copy that to the clipboard, and what we do is we make a head, get or a post request to that URL, and we do that from within our cron job or within our serverless function or scheduled task. So let's go back to VS Code, and right at the bottom of our scheduled function here, just before we return the data, I'm going to perform that GET request. And again, we can use the requests module for that, and we can paste in the URL that we copied. And this is a URL to the Heartbeat service, and you get back your ID here from the platform. So we're sending that GET request, and then we can run the function at the bottom. So I'm going to run 𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗽, and let's go back to BetterStack now. Now this user interface will update in real time. You can see that we have been waiting for the heartbeat for 1 minute and 27 seconds at the moment, and we're waiting to record our first heartbeat. Now this is going to happen as our application sends the requests to the heartbeat endpoint. Once you get the heartbeat, you can see that it's recorded here, and we can see that our service is up and everything is running as expected. Now we're expecting the heartbeat to be sent roughly every 30 seconds, so when we get to this point here, we're hopefully going to see this update, and we're going to see that update as the new request comes in, and that's happened just now. So this monitoring allows you to take your scheduled jobs, and it allows you to detect if anything has gone wrong, if for example the request has not been sent to this endpoint, and then you can get alerted by BetterStack via email or SMS or push notification, and then you can take steps to resolve the incident. Now what I'm going to do is actually stop the application, stop the scheduled task, and then if we go back to the user interface, our job still has a status of up, and the last heartbeat was recorded 45 seconds ago. Now what I'm going to do is wait a little bit of time, and the heartbeats are not going to be received anymore because we've stopped the script and our scheduled job is no longer running. That's going to create what's called an incident on the platform, and that incident is then going to email the administrator and inform them of the problem. So let's wait a little bit of time until the status changes here, and again it will change in real time on the page, and we'll restart the video when that happens. Now you can see the status has now changed to down, and an incident has been recorded, and an email has been sent to my account informing me of this incident, and that's going to allow you to take action to fix the problem. And on the left hand sidebar here we have an incidents tab. We can click through to that, and you can see some of the incidents that have occurred on the platform, and this is the one that we have that occurred 1 minute ago. This was in our web scraping job here. If we look at the incidents page, you can see the problem, the cause. In this case it was a missed heartbeat, and that is an ongoing incident, and you can see that you can even leave comments here for the rest of your team, and that allows you to track the problem and also the steps to the resolution of that problem with the rest of your team. So it's very easy to set up these heartbeats on BetterStack to monitor your scheduled jobs, and this is automatically going to inform you of any incidents or problems that occur with your scheduled tasks. Now let's move on to a quick discussion of some other methods. Now the scheduled package that we have is useful for these simple tasks, but there are different ways of creating these automated or periodic jobs. One example would be a Unix cron job, and this is useful for things like database backups, executing scripts, and so on. And in the Python world, for a more robust solution, you can use a package like Celery. That comes with something called Celery Beat that allows you to perform scheduled tasks within the context of, for example, a Django application. And finally, you can also perform scheduled tasks using serverless functions, for example, AWS Lambda or Azure Functions. And the benefit of using these is that the entire infrastructure is handled by the cloud platform, and you just write the logic for the function. But with all of these approaches, you can monitor the tasks using BetterStack. And if you're interested in any videos on any of those topics, let us know in the comments. And we also have an article on the BetterStack site, and this is linked in the description of the video, and this will go into more detail on job scheduling in Python. If you've enjoyed this content, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the BetterStack channel, and we'll see you in the next video.